Hi everyone, and welcome to Faith Brynel Talks Law podcast. I'm Faith Brynel, and here we explore careers, leadership, entrepreneurship, and the journeys behind people building impactful work in their fields. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by Mike Williams, co-founder of Flake Bake, a brand bringing authentic Jamaican patties to the UK market. Mike has been recognised as one of HSBC's and UK BBS's top 25 entrepreneurs to watch, and was featured on Aldi's Next Big Thing, and was also named Entrepreneur Rising Star at the BBBA Awards. Beyond business, Mike is passionate about community, mentorship, and improving the lives of others through food and entrepreneurship. Mike, it's great to have you on the podcast today. How are you feeling?
Hi, Faith. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. It's a pleasure to meet you finally as well. I'm feeling good. Feeling good.
Likewise, it's great to meet you virtually, of course. So let's start at the beginning, Mike. Talk to us about what inspired you to co-found Flake Bake, and how did the idea of bringing authentic Jamaican patties to the market first come about?
It all started from my dad. My dad worked in my uncle's bakery in the late 90s when he moved to the UK from Jamaica. And in the 2008, eventually, when my uncle's bakery had closed down a few years prior, my dad ended up going off on his own and trying to go and hand that with food and bakery. And I was working with my dad in 2008 when he started Caribbean Spice. In that particular bakery, we sold Caribbean food, so it was a takeaway as well, and we were supplying Caribbean pastry to other takeaways. And it was a smaller part of the business, but our patties did really well in that business. So while I was at university, my dad and I spoke about starting a solely a patty business because we'd seen that Caribbean food was on the rise in the UK, and with the likes of Levi Roots and people, like even like Usain Bolt, people just wanted to try more Caribbean food, and we just saw that there was demand for it. So we thought patties were the more was a more commercially viable product. So that's when, after I left uni in 2012, we started Flake Bake, and Flake Bake Limited was supposed to just supply solely Jamaican patties to Caribbean takeaways and other businesses, essentially anyone that wanted to buy Jamaican patties in bulk. And so we weren't a customer facing business anymore. We became a B2B business. So that's where it all started.
Excellent, Mike. Thank you very much for talking us through your wonderful journey. As you mentioned, some key milestones there and some key really important clientele. People see a successful business, but they don't understand the sacrifices, the long hours, the uncertainty at times, and the persistence and indeed the resilience it takes to get there. So thank you very much for sharing that. And indeed, yes, patties are commercially viable. I am Jamaican myself, and I do love a good patty. So I completely resonate with you there, because you were recognized as one of HSBC's and the UK BBS's top 25 entrepreneurs to watch. And you all appeared on Aldi's Next Big Thing. So what were some of the biggest challenges you actually faced in the early stages of building Flake Bake alongside your father, as you mentioned?
I think the challenge really stemmed firstly from made process, and making patties. We were a growing business, but as you're making it by hand, it's very difficult to scale. The skill of making Jamaican patties by people trying to do this more and more, and the team that we had, get really, really talented and good with us this day, but we wanted to do more. Um, and so when you talk about Aldi's Next Big Thing, that was the game changer for our brand. Uh, for the first time, we got introduced to large volume manufacturing and could outsource a bigger part of our production. Then entered Aldi's Next Big Thing TV show, winning that competition. we worked with large volume manufacturers that then helped to make the product on our behalf. And that gave us the ability to scale nationally, which is just one of the biggest challenges when you're a small brand trying to expand. But also we had a name like Aldi behind us who were supporting us, and that really made it easier in terms of finding manufacturer because we also couldn't find people that were prepared to work with our brand to help us scale. So that's the biggest challenges I found scaling the business. But just your general kind of stuff. Funding the business was always a challenge in the early stage. Uh, Finding the right people to work in a business was the kind of challenge that we faced, and also marketing was a challenge in the early stages. The business really grew organically from word of mouth. And early days, we used to do a little bit of advertising on radio, stuff like that. But yeah, you're limited in funding to start out. So the challenges were very similar to most small businesses.
Well, thank you very much, Mike, for sharing that and being so candid about some of the challenges that you face, because I really believe that it will continue to inspire, entrepreneurs and people who are trying to start their own business to really push beyond the fray despite the challenges. And it's really interesting, especially the point you made about spotting an opportunity and turning something culturally meaningful into a business idea. I can see that passion and that purpose for your business. You mentioned some of your early challenges were marketing, trying to harness that organic growth, looking at, radio ads. You mentioned finding the right people. I believe that's something that entrepreneurs and budding entrepreneurs can resonate with in terms of trying to find the right infrastructure and put that into place. And I believe that, that Flake Bake was the first Jamaican patty company to have a TV advert. So that is also great in itself. It's a great milestone as well. What lessons have you learned around resilience and decision making whilst growing your business?
The biggest one is not to give up. It's not to give up because we were at a stage where we were ready to pack it all in or to sell on, get rid of. We just reached a point after COVID. So by 2022, Dad and I had a very serious conversation about just stopping because it didn't feel like it was working anymore. Costs rising so much post COVID, it just felt like this makes no sense. So as far as we were concerned, after 2023, going to be doing something different. That's when a friend of mine, Pierre, introduced me to this program called Aldi thing, saying you should really apply for this with a great chance of winning. And that changed my life because we went from thinking that would close down, expanding the business and supplying over 1,000 Aldis nationwide by 2024. So that was definitely my biggest lesson. Um, and decision making, it's just taking risks. When you're a founder and when you're a business owner, it's a lot of risk to take on, especially in food. It's a lot of risk. Yeah. What we were about to do was to go out there trying to become a national brand. We were going to go on TV, represent not just ourselves or family, but our community, our culture. And I think that's a big risk. But my dad and I were very confident, a great team, and so we thought we were going to go out there and do the best to represent our community, and we think we did a great job at that.
Yeah, excellent. Many aspiring entrepreneurs sometimes underestimate how much mindset and perseverance really play a role in building something sustainable. Indeed, I'm really glad how you kind of tabernacled and really spoke about your journey after COVID. I know that a lot of businesses and companies were affected by COVID and really, to an extent, are still being impacted to this day. Thank you very much for sharing your experience there, but also about how you do have to take risks. Sometimes you do have to step out of your comfort zone in order to get the result that you want. And I'm really grateful that you've shared that in such a candid and honest manner. And I know my listeners will benefit from such impactful and really anecdotal experience. You've spoken about improving the lives of others. How do you see entrepreneurship as a form of tool wielded to create social impact?
Social impact is at the heart of entrepreneurship. So you think if you're an entrepreneur in a local community, you start a business, you're giving jobs to local people, and that's in kind benefiting the community itself, right? And our business is what I describe as a community business because a lot of the when we started, and even to this day, are family members and friends, people that I grew up around. When I think about it, sometimes I think I'm in charge of that person's family. I'm in charge of making sure they, when I think about the business, I'm not just thinking about myself. I'm thinking about, what I do, how it impacts all that work within it. The other side of it, we're making food. So one of the things that we do is we work with charity in Brixton, and we support them by providing patties every week, patties for them to sell, patties for them to feed people who can't necessarily afford a hot meal. And the money generated from that again comes back into that community project, just to support people in the local community. We also try and do stuff within the Caribbean community back in Jamaica. So post Hurricane Beryl and Hurricane Melissa, we look at supporting schools in Jamaica to help them rebuild and keep the nation growing. I'm a strong believer of education, because education has helped me a lot to get to where I'm at. So we want to try and help improve the lives of children in Jamaica and hopefully build more entrepreneurs like myself, because I was born in Jamaica and I grew up in Jamaica for half of my life as well.
Amazing, Mike. Excellent. I really like that perspective, because what you've highlighted there is that entrepreneurship isn't just about profit, but it's about representation. It's about opportunity. It's about community, social impact, bringing people together. As you mentioned here, you work with charities. But I like what you talked about in terms of the crossover between social impact and entrepreneurship. And you mentioned local people benefiting directly. I think that's a great initiative, and that's definitely something to keep at the forefront of what you do in terms of your ethos. But additionally, as you mentioned, education. Yes, education is really important. And I actually work with another company called Learn with Lolonyo, which is all about cultural representation in education. And I'm glad that you mentioned about being born in Jamaica, because my dad was actually born in Jamaica as well. And he came to the UK when he was 4 years old. So thank you very much for sharing your really impactful journey. To conclude, for young people listening to this podcast, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds who might have an idea, but they're not sure either where to start, what advice would you give them?
Um, the first advice I would give is to say, start with what you have. Dream big, but think about what you have within your capacity. So when we started our business, we got a small loan, and my dad put money together, and we used second-hand equipment. We used some of the stuff from my dad's initial business, and then we just built from there. We weren't trying to knock on retail doors from the beginning. Um, we used local delivery drivers to do kind of drop flyers and leaflets and things like that, just locally, and then built ourselves up over the years. But a lot of people think that when you're starting, you need to have like £100,000 or 500,000. A lot of people do start with big raise when they're raising cash to start a business, but we started very small and built our way up. So that would be my first thing, to start with what you have. Secondly, is to be prepared to work really hard. You're going to go through periods where it feels like nothing's working out. It feels like you're not winning. But if you just keep pushing, you keep working hard, you persevere, you know, you will get to the right place. And sometimes you don't have all the right answers. I find that the answers reveal themselves, especially to things that you think you have no way of solving it. Maybe God always helps you find a way to solve these problems, but you can only do that if you push in and not give it up.
Excellent, Mike. Thank you. That's such valuable advice, especially the emphasis on starting where you are, using what you have, and learning along the way. It definitely resonates with my mantra of my own CIC, which is it's not an event, it's a journey, and your journey can begin now, because we understand that, your lived experiences do matter, and it's about using and harnessing what you have. What I love is what you said is be prepared to work hard. It's great to have a dream, but you've got to be able to push yourself. And it goes back to something that my dad has always instilled in us, is that it's not about carrying buckets, it's about about building a pipeline. So you've got to build something sustainable. You've got to build something with what you have, and you have to be determined and resilient in the face of many challenges that you will undoubtedly face. But Mike, thank you so much for joining me today on Faith Brynel Talks Law podcast, and for sharing your incredible, inspirational and insightful journey with us there, and your insights into entrepreneurship. And to everyone listening, if you've enjoyed this conversation, make sure you subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Follow us at Faith Brynel Talks Law on TikTok. You can connect with me and Mike on LinkedIn. I'm at Faith Brynel Palmel, and Mike is at Mike Williams. So please do follow and share with his journey and the podcast. Remember, pivot and don't panic. Thanks all. See you next week.